It's ESPN NFL analyst Dan Orlovsky, and Dan's appearances on One Bills Live are presented by Caesars Sportsbook, an official mobile sports betting partner of the Buffalo Bills. And Dan, it was billed as the game of the year. It did not disappoint. Bills Chiefs, and Josh puts the cape on at the end to give them a very, very valuable two-score lead. I want to go inside that play a little bit specifically, which I'm sure you've watched multiple times. So 4th and 2, after a 3rd and 2 inside run play goes nowhere, as was the case for most of the game for the Bills running game between the tackles. And so you've got 4th and 2, and Joe Brady earlier this week said, we had a man call with a zone check. And Josh quickly realized it wasn't. That's part of the equation I want you to unfurl for us first in terms of a quarterback's mindset when they recognize that. And, Josh just said, screw it, I'm going to do it myself. And then the second part of the question is no spy on that play, which perhaps you don't really see all that often on 4th and 2, but maybe walk me through Spagnuolo's mindset of not going with a spy there as well.
Yeah, so I think, first of all, I was not shocked that they went for it. I'm sure there was a little bit of conversation of were they going to kick a field goal and kind of put it on the defense, but going for it every single time against Patrick is the right choice, and specifically when you have a guy that can go toe-to-toe with them. So that plays a little bit like the one I remember on Sunday Night Football that they throw to Cook against the Dolphins. The premise of it is you're anticipating man coverage, which you're going to get 99 out of 100 times against a 4th and 2 situation, and even more so against Kansas City that runs man basically every play almost, So the fact that Joe calls a play that is specifically designed for man and to beat man is absolutely the right thing to do. And then as a quarterback, I think the biggest thing is, so back to the play, you're trying to pick people to leak Shakir out from the backfield. They start Shakir out as his normal traditional wide receiver bunch stacks, which is a huge part of that game. They motion him back to the backfield, and they're trying to create traffic and pick him against man coverage. 100% the right thing to do. And Spags does two things that are a little bit abnormal in that situation. Number one, he just plays like a cover 3. So zone eyes, there's 4 rushers, zone eyes, everyone's kind of, he's trying to outsmart the offense in that moment. He's knowing, self-scouting, you guys know I'm going to call man coverage and you're going to call man coverage beater. I'm going to call zone. And so in many ways, like, you tip your hat to Spags. It's a tremendous call, candidly. There's no way that the play should work for the offense. And the reason, Chris, there's no spy is there's 7 spies. They're playing zone.
Everybody's eyes are on Josh. That's why that play's unbelievable. Everybody's looking at him, and he does that.
He's got everybody. He's got all kinds of eyes looking at him. And so you don't necessarily have – and Torrance does a phenomenal job versus Chris Jones as well in that moment. I think from the quarterback standpoint, and it's not just a Josh, it's definitely a Joe Brady thing as well, and probably a Ronald Curry thing, is you sit down and Josh knows why we're calling that play or why you're calling that play and what you're looking for. Okay, Josh, if we don't get the look, what do you do? And in reality, the answer is you got to go make a play. There's no X's and O's thing there that, well, if they don't give us this, then we get to. It's really go make a play. And I think that's kind of the mindset you see with Josh. Once he puts that back foot down and he realizes, oh gosh, it ain't zone, and there's that seam, and that's why the Torrance block is such a big deal, because he turns Chris a little bit. Now I think Chris goes inside, but just that little turn by Chris gives Josh that seam. And, I've said this many times. That's an example of why there's only so many people on the planet that are franchise quarterbacks, because you just have a guy that goes above the X's and O's. And let me be clear to end this. The play should not work. The defense wins that rep. The only reason the play works is because the quarterback.
That's right. And you're right. The defense is set up. They outsmarted the coordinator and Joe. And Joe did the right thing, calling a man beater. That's what the Chiefs do. The Chiefs kind of try and beat you left-handed there. They're going to do something they're not expected to do. And they don't have that single guy because they've got, like you said, all the defenders are watching the backfield to read the quarterback's eyes as to where he's going. And because the receivers are running hard, they all have to drop back out into coverage and cover those guys. You see guys starting to man up as the play breaks down and the pocket breaks. Yeah, it's one of those plays where the quarterback sees it a little bit before. And I'll say this too. Karlaftis just misses swiping that ball out of his hands and coming out of the pocket. You know, I mean, there's all these there's this much about 6 times on that play and all throughout that game that makes us – that is exactly the kind of game we thought we were going to get, and it's all of those this muches that make the difference, right? I mean, give me an idea about what you saw overall in this game. Certainly the Bills had the time of possession. They took that away from the Chiefs, which they'd been depending on. They got the quick turnover, the first turnover on Pat's first throw and the turnover on his last throw. All the stuff in between. Give us your big synopsis about why this game went this way.
Yeah, I think so. There's 2 plays offensively that really stand out for me. Number 1 is the Amari Cooper kind of double move down the right sideline that he just catches essentially like that shoestring over his shoulder. The reason why that stands out for me is when you play against Kansas City's defense, as an offense, there's a couple things you have to be on a play-by-play basis. The situation never matters. Every play, you have to be ready for all-out zero blitz. And that play was the perfect example of they knew what they were getting. Josh kind of controlled the protection at the line of scrimmage, and they're getting zero, and he drifts back and he floats it out to Amari. This is the one-on-one Amari. That's a beautiful throw as well. But the other one where Amari kind of catches his outside of his frame, and that play right there told me they got a plan. Because you can't beat Kansas City unless you always know and anticipate some zero. That's a beautiful throw and catch. But it started with Josh and Joe Brady anticipating the zero blitz. And the second play that really stood out to me was the James Cook second touchdown run. The one when he runs through the safety. That to me was a play that sent a message very clearly to like the whole team, the building, people watching. It was a physical, like, hey, we are no longer going to be pushed around. Not that they have been, but you know what I'm saying? Like, it was like a message sent, like, we're going to take the game almost. And so those 2 plays stood out to me. I think offensively, I'll go back to they had a great plan for zero. They had a great plan for all-out pressure. They hit it 4 or 5 times. They used so many stacks and bunches to force miscommunication and lack of being on the same page by Kansas City's defense. They knew, if you watched tape, and I talked about this last week, the nickel position in Kansas City right now is a little bit of an issue. Snead not being there, starting to show up. The injury to Watson starting to show up. McDuffie kind of having to be outside and not that. And so they attacked it with a bunch of different stacks and motions and forced communication. So that was a really, really, really big deal. And then I think defensively, number 1, they played tremendous physical man coverage, more than I expected. They challenged Kansas City. We're going to play man coverage, and we're going to create one-on-ones in our pass rush. We're going to let the pass rush get home. I think the second thing was they were very strategic in walking 5 guys up to the line of scrimmage. And then as the ball got snapped, and what that does is that forces the 5 offensive linemen to block one-on-one. The left tackle had to block a couple one-on-one, but they dropped out and played zone and had 4 rushers, but they still created that one-on-one. I thought the strategy behind that was really impactful.
One of the knocks that some fans had after the game was the persistence of running on first down, which was far too often gaining nothing or a yard against this Chiefs' third-ranked run defense. I respect staying with it as much as Brady did, but do you think they went a little too far with that? And maybe that's commitment to trying to run clock, control clock, time of possession, but over half of their third downs were 3rd and 8 or more because of it.
So I think a little bit is you have to ask yourself how confident you are on third down. If you feel like you got a really good third down package, that you have a beat on what they're going to do on third down, and again, they did, because You can get in. They got into so many different of those bat bunches and stacks, and new man coverage was going to come or zero. So if you're comfortable in that and you believe that you're prepared for that, I'm not saying you want to get there, but if you feel good about that, then you're not scared of it. And so then it affects the way you call first and second down. And if you feel confident about that third down situation, then maybe you feel a little bit better of saying, no, we're disciplined on first down. We're going to control the football game. We're going to allow our offensive linemen to lean on them just a little bit and make sure that we're not, because 3rd and 7 is a very different world than 3rd and 12, obviously. And so I understand the premise of it. It obviously worked out. But I don't necessarily hate the fact that if that was the mindset going into it, because there's also this, you knew Kansas City's not going to run away from anybody. So the flow of the game and making sure that you're getting the game to the fourth quarter type of mindset, I don't have an issue with.
Give us a little insight as as a quarterback. You saw Pat Mahomes back there. What about the pressure that the Bills were able to get on him? I mean, sacked him a couple of times, and it certainly seemed like they forced him to throw the ball when he didn't want to.
Yep.
They forced his hand, and he was not being able to throw the ball exactly where he wanted, when he wanted to do it. And even so, even the 2 interceptions, he got rid of it, but he was under duress, and it was a decision he wasn't happy with.
Yeah, I mean, it was from the start of the game. I think that second or third snap of the game, he throws the interception, and it's vintage Buffalo defense. So outstanding discipline by all 11 guys in their zone coverage. Physical at certain points when you have to be. They were physical, trying to take maybe that first guy away essentially, and then forcing Patrick to move, knowing Patrick's aware of the left tackle. He knows the left tackle's not in a good place. And so he's constantly playing more sped up than sometimes he has to. And so there's just that zone coverage that you sit in there saying, okay, if we take that first thought away of what they want to get to, guys, I would love for somebody around your guys' area to talk to Terrell Bernard candidly, because from my perspective, when you watch, it looks like Bernard knows basically everything that's coming. It looked like he was calling things out pre-snap on a consistent basis. Them using him as the spy was brilliant. I thought that they were really good with understanding that the left defensive end would go inside. Patrick would try to get out and he would spy him. But even like the touchdown pass that he has, Patrick, like that 2 or 3 yarder, Bernard gets so mad at Taron Johnson because Bernard knew what was coming. And so it looked like they had a really good beat on what they were trying to get done offensively. And so I thought the plan and the understanding of how to take that first thought away and then the rush would be impactful was a big deal. He's a tremendous player, man.
Yeah, super instinctive and a defensive captain for a reason. I want to just touch on the secondary a little bit, Dan, because as you know, Buffalo's secondary, aside from the 2 outside corners, underwent some change. They didn't have Taron for almost a month at the start of the season, and yet here we are on the back half of the schedule. And to your earlier point, they call more man coverage, and it's due in part to the fact that Kansas City's explosiveness isn't nearly what it used to be, especially without Rice and Hollywood Brown in this lineup. So just the development and cohesion of that group after losing veteran players like a Poyer and a Hyde to kind of not rebuild, but just kind of reload and not really look like they've missed much of a beat. I mean, this is a team that leads the league in takeaways right now.
Yeah, it's fascinating. It should be studied when it comes to player development, candidly. They are a walking example of how paramount player development is. And when you do it the right way, I think I've mentioned this before, that when, we did the Monday night game against Jacksonville, and I asked, because that was when, Chris, a bunch of those guys were out, and we asked Babich about it. And I kind of asked it in a way of not being disrespectful, but being honest, of saying, how are these guys playing so well? You have a 5th or a 6th round middle linebacker playing as well as a Terrell Bernard, or you have, a fifth or sixth or seventh round corner in playing as impactful as a Taron Johnson or a corner from Villanova, Benford playing as good as some of the corners that have been there for the past couple of years. And, his response was twofold, that they obsess over the second and third string players or the backups. The meetings are everything. That there's no wasted moment week to week or day to day. They're in meetings and they're on the practice field and they're going through walkthroughs. I mean, everybody is paying attention to all that stuff and they're getting reps mentally. And then I think they know that we as an offense, when you play against Buffalo, we know how we want to try to attack them. And I think the defender to a man knows how they're going to be attacked. And so they know the weaknesses of their defense. And that gives them a little bit more ability to protect against that rather than the strength of the defense, if that makes sense. When they're playing that zone defense in those corners, they know that the whole shot is the weakness, or that behind that second level on that hash is the weakness. So they protect against it because they know that as an offense, we're going to try to attack it and impact it. And it allows them to play to a great, great strength.
So the Bills come out 9-2. They're headed into their bye week. They got San Francisco, the LA Rams, and Detroit coming out of the bye. Starting with the Chiefs game, we knew this 4-game stretch was really going to be a test for how good this team was. And you look at those 4 teams, or those three of those teams, and obviously the Chiefs in the AFC Championship. Those are teams that are going to be in the tournament as well. What is your assessment of this Bills team headed into that stretch of games? The Niners, the Rams, the Lions. Give us a little bit of a what's it going to take? What's it mean? All of that stuff about this next 3-game stretch.
Well, I would be lying to you, Steve, if I told you before the season I thought they could win the Super Bowl. I thought they would win the division. I just didn't believe that they were high-end talent enough to win the Super Bowl. I don't feel that way anymore. They can win the Super Bowl. God bless if Matt Milano comes back. Watch out. So I think that you've watched them, kind of their younger players continue to ascend. What's it going to take? I think that can this offense continue to play to the identity and the philosophy that they have through the first 11 weeks? Can they be that offense that it's very clear that each guy has a certain role and they want to just allow that player to thrive in that role? Joe Brady's discipline as a play caller, Josh's discipline as a decision maker. We started this with Josh put on the cape, but Josh didn't put on the cape in the first quarter. Josh put on the cape 3 or 4 times. He didn't have to do it all game. So can that continue to be the identity? And when you're talking about San Francisco, Steve, they're obviously decimated by injuries as well. This defensive line could dominate the football game. This is not the San Francisco offensive line of old. The Rams, I think you can get after the Rams a little bit in the pass game. They got a tremendous defensive line. You got to cover Puka and Cooper Kupp, though. That'll be as big a pass game challenge as maybe they've seen all season, Buffalo defensively. The Lions is the one. The Lions are the measuring stick right now for everybody. If you can go and prove that you can go blow for blow against that team in all facets, you're as good as anybody in the NFL.
Yep. Dan, thanks for the insight. Appreciate it as always. We'll catch up with you next week. Appreciate it.
Appreciate you guys. Enjoy.